Imagine waking up after 1,000 years of imprisonment, only to discover that the world has completely forgotten who you are. Not just forgotten, they actively despise you. They spit on your name. They call you half-blood trash, an abomination not worthy of breathing the same air as them. But here's the twist that makes this story absolutely insane. The person they're insulting, the one they're calling worthless, is actually the most powerful martial god to ever exist. Someone who could erase entire kingdoms with a single thought. Someone who once stood at the absolute pinnacle of power, feared and respected by every living being. This is the story of how one man's return from a millennium-long seal turns an entire world upside down. And trust me when I say, the revenge that follows is nothing short of legendary. Let me paint you a picture of where our story begins. 1,000 years ago, there existed a martial god so powerful that even speaking his true name could bring calamity. This wasn't some generic, overpowered character. We're talking about someone who had mastered every single martial art known to humanity. Someone who could manipulate spiritual energy so perfectly that reality itself bent to his will. The kind of power that makes you question whether mortal beings should ever be allowed to reach such heights. But power always attracts jealousy. And when you're at the top, everyone wants to bring you down. The 12 guardian sects, the supposed protectors of the martial world, grew terrified of this martial god's strength. They saw him not as a guardian, but as a threat to their own power structures. So they did what fearful men always do when confronted with something they can't control. They conspired. They plotted in secret chambers, weaving schemes that would take decades to execute. And when the moment was right, they struck. But here's the thing about trying to kill a god. It's not exactly easy. They couldn't defeat him in combat. Even all 12 sects combined, with their legendary founders and secret techniques, couldn't match his power. So instead, they went for something more insidious. They used a forbidden sealing technique, one so powerful and so dark that it required the sacrifice of thousands of innocent lives just to activate. They lured him into a trap, using everything he cared about as bait. And then they sealed him away in a dimension where time moved differently, where consciousness faded into an endless nightmare. For 1,000 years he existed in that prison. Not truly alive, not truly dead. Just suspended. Aware enough to experience the torment, but powerless to do anything about it. Can you imagine that? 1,000 years of absolute isolation, knowing that those you trusted had betrayed you, knowing that everything you fought to protect was probably gone. That kind of experience doesn't just change a person. It fundamentally breaks them down and rebuilds them into something entirely different. But seals, no matter how powerful, eventually weaken. And when that seal finally shattered, when our martial god finally drew his first free breath in a millennium, he found himself in a world that had moved on without him. The martial world he remembered was completely gone. The techniques he had mastered were now considered ancient and obsolete. The sects he knew had either disappeared or transformed beyond recognition. And most shockingly of all, nobody remembered him. Not as the legendary martial god. Not as the powerful figure who once stood at the peak. His name had been completely erased from history, wiped clean as if he never existed. But that's not even the worst part. No, the worst part is that when he finally emerged into this new world, weak and disoriented from the seal, the people who found him took one look and immediately labeled him as something that would haunt his return. A half-blood. In this new world, bloodline purity had become everything. Pure-blooded martial artists were considered nobility, blessed with innate power and talent. Mixed bloods, or half-bloods as they were derogatorily called, were treated as subhuman. They were discriminated against, enslaved, beaten down, and told from birth that they would never amount to anything. Society had literally built itself around this twisted hierarchy, with purebloods at the top enjoying every privilege imaginable, while half-bloods scraped by at the bottom, barely surviving. And our martial god? He gets mistaken for one of these half-bloods. Why? Because the seal had changed him. It had altered his spiritual signature, corrupted his energy pathways, made him appear different from the pure-blooded martial artists of this new era. When people looked at him with their spiritual sight, they didn't see a god. They saw contamination. They saw impurity. They saw trash. The irony is almost painful. A being who had transcended the very concept of bloodlines, who had achieved power through pure skill and determination, rather than hereditary gifts, was now being judged entirely by the one thing that never mattered to him: his blood. But here's where things get interesting. Because while everyone sees him as weak, as worthless, as someone to be pitied or kicked around, he still retains fragments of his former knowledge. His body might be weakened, his power diminished, but his mind, that tactical, strategic, absolutely brilliant mind that conquered the martial world once before, is still intact. And he's about to show this ignorant new world exactly what happens when you underestimate a god. The first person to make this mistake is a young master from the prestigious Crimson Phoenix sect. This arrogant punk, barely 20 years old, comes from a family that's considered martial nobility. Pure bloodline going back 10 generations. Natural talent that would make most people weep with envy. And an ego the size of a mountain. He spots our protagonist walking through the lower district of the city, and something about him just screams easy target. Maybe it's the ragged clothes. Maybe it's the way he carries himself, still adjusting to his weakened body. Or maybe this young master is just a bully who needs to feel superior by putting others down. "Hey, half-blood trash!" the young master calls out, his voice dripping with contempt. His friends laugh, a chorus of privileged young masters who've never faced real hardship in their lives. "What are you doing in this part of the city? Don't you know that filth like you should stay in the outer districts where you belong?" Our protagonist stops. He doesn't turn around immediately. He just stops. And in that moment of stillness, something shifts in the air. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but those with true sensitivity to spiritual energy would feel it. A pressure, ancient and vast, like standing at the bottom of an ocean trench. "What did you call me?" The voice is quiet, controlled. But underneath that control is something dangerous, something that hasn't been unleashed in 1,000 years. The young master laughs harder. He's completely oblivious to the danger he's in. "Are you deaf as well as worthless? I called you half-blood trash. What are you going to do about it? Cry? Run away like your mongrel kind always does?" Now, in any normal story, this is where our protagonist would probably get beat up, swear revenge, train for months, and then come back stronger. But our martial god? He's not interested in following that particular script. He's been humiliated enough for 1 millennium. Thank you very much. What happens next happens so fast that most observers miss it entirely. One moment, the young master is laughing. The next moment, he's on his knees, gasping for air, his face turning purple as invisible hands seem to squeeze the life out of him. Our protagonist hasn't moved, hasn't even turned around. But somehow, the young master is experiencing what feels like the weight of a mountain pressing down on his shoulders, crushing him into the ground. "Let me tell you something," the protagonist says, his voice still quiet, but now carrying a weight that makes every nearby person instinctively step back. "In my time, we had a saying, never judge a warrior by their bloodline. Judge them by the enemies they've defeated and the battles they've survived. You, with your pure blood and your fancy sect, wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes in the world I knew." The pressure intensifies. The young master is now fully prostrated on the ground, unable to move, unable to speak, barely able to breathe. His friends want to help, want to do something, but they're frozen in place by an instinctive fear they don't understand. "This is your only warning," the protagonist continues. "The next person who calls me half-blood trash we'll learn exactly why bloodlines mean nothing compared to true power. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the pressure releases. The young master collapses completely, coughing and wheezing, tears streaming down his face. Our protagonist finally turns to look at him, and for just a moment, less than a heartbeat, his eyes flash with ancient power, and everyone who sees it feels their blood run cold. Then he walks away, leaving behind a young master who will never forget this day, and a crowd of witnesses who don't quite understand what they just saw. But this is just the beginning. This is merely the first crack in the facade, the first hint that this half-blood trash might be something far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Because as our protagonist walks through this city, observing how drastically the martial world has changed, he's making plans. Detailed, intricate plans that span years and involve hundreds of moving pieces. He notices how the current power structure works, how the great sects have grown complacent in their power, how they abuse half-bloods not out of necessity, but simply because they can, how corruption has eaten away at the very foundations of the martial world, turning what was once a path to self-improvement into nothing more than a tool for the privileged to maintain their status. And he sees opportunity in all of this chaos. Because in a world built on lies and prejudice, a single person with the right knowledge and the right skills can topple everything. The question isn't whether he'll shake up this world. The question is how much of it will remain standing when he's done. Let me tell you about the art of hiding in plain sight. It's a skill that most powerful beings never bother to learn, because why would they? When you're strong enough to crush any opposition, why hide? But our protagonist spent 1,000 years in isolation contemplating this very question, and he came to a realization that would define his strategy moving forward. True power isn't just about strength, it's about information, positioning, and timing. So when he emerges into this new world, weak and vulnerable, he makes a decision that goes against every instinct a martial god might have. He decides to embrace the half-blood label, to lean into it, to become exactly what these fools think he is, all while rebuilding his strength in the shadows. It's a brilliant strategy, really, because once people label you as trash, they stop paying attention. They stop seeing you as a threat. They dismiss everything you do, every achievement, as luck or coincidence. It's the perfect cover for someone who needs time to recover and adapt. He starts by finding shelter in the worst part of the city, the half-blood district. This is where all the undesirables live, packed into cramped buildings that look like they might collapse at any moment. The streets are filthy, the air thick with desperation and hopelessness. Pure-blooded martial artists never come here unless they're looking for cheap labor or someone to beat up for entertainment. It's perfect. The building he chooses is run by an old woman, herself a half-blood who's lived in this district for 60 years. She's seen everything, survived everything, and developed a sharp eye for trouble. When our protagonist shows up asking for a room, she looks him over with those keen eyes and sees something that makes her pause. "You're different," she says, not as an accusation but as a simple observation. "How so?" he asks, genuinely curious about what she's picked up on. She's quiet for a long moment, studying him. "You walk like someone who's never been afraid. Real half-bloods, we learn to make ourselves small, to move through the world without drawing attention. But you move like you own every space you step into. That's dangerous. That'll get you killed in this district." He smiles at that. It's the first genuine smile he's had since awakening. "You're very perceptive. I'll work on that." "See that you do," she says, handing him a key to a room on the 3rd floor. "Rent's due on the 1st of every month. Miss a payment and you're out. No exceptions." "Fair enough. May I ask your name?" "Grandmother Chen is what everyone calls me." "And you?" He pauses, realizing he can't use his real name. That name belongs to a god who supposedly died 1,000 years ago. He needs something new, something that fits his current circumstances. "You can call me Shen." "Well then, Shen, Welcome to the worst building in the worst district of the city. Try not to die. The room is exactly what you'd expect. Barely large enough for a bed, a small table, and not much else. The window doesn't close properly, letting in cold air at night. The walls are thin enough that he can hear every conversation in the neighboring rooms. It's about as far from the luxurious palaces he once inhabited as you can get. He loves it. Because this humble room represents something important. A fresh start. A chance to rebuild. Not as a god who was handed power through ancient legacy, but as someone who has to claw their way up from nothing. He's done it before. Centuries ago, when he was just a young martial artist with more determination than talent. He can do it again. But first, he needs to understand this new world's power system. The martial arts have evolved in his absence, and while the fundamentals remain the same, the applications and techniques have changed dramatically. He spends his first week just observing, watching how people move, how they channel energy, what's considered strong by current standards. What he discovers both amazes and disappoints him. The good news, spiritual energy, the fundamental force that powers martial arts, has become more abundant in this era. The world itself has changed, growing richer in this resource, making it easier for people to cultivate power. In his time, only 1 in 1,000 had enough natural affinity to become a true martial artist. Now, nearly 1 in 10 can reach at least basic levels of cultivation. The bad news, despite this abundance, the actual quality of martial artists has declined dramatically. The great sects have grown so obsessed with bloodline purity that they've forgotten the fundamental principle that made martial arts great in the first place. Martial arts is the art of turning weakness into strength, of overcoming natural limitations through skill and determination. Instead, the modern sects rely almost entirely on hereditary techniques and natural talent. They teach their disciples to channel power, but not to truly understand it. To execute techniques, but not to create their own. It's like having an ocean of water, but only knowing how to swim in a straight line. Vast potential, extremely limited actual application. For someone like our protagonist, who spent lifetimes mastering not just techniques, but the underlying principles that make those techniques work, this is both an advantage and an insult. An advantage because it means his true knowledge is far more valuable than anyone realizes. An insult because it represents a fall from grace for the martial arts he once elevated to an art form. But insults can wait. Right now, he needs to build a foundation. And that means doing something that most immortals would consider beneath them, starting from scratch. He begins with the basics. Every morning before dawn, while the district still sleeps, he practices fundamental movements in a tiny courtyard behind the building. Stances that look simple but require perfect balance. Strikes that appear weak but concentrate force with devastating precision. Breathing techniques that synchronize body and spirit. To any observer, he would look like a complete novice, someone clumsily trying to learn martial arts without proper instruction. The movements are slow, almost painfully so. Sometimes he'll spend an entire hour working on a single transition between stances, repeating it hundreds of times with minute adjustments. But that observer would be missing what's really happening. Because what looks like clumsy practice is actually something far more complex. He's adapting his ancient techniques to work with his currently weakened body. His muscle memory remembers movements that his body can no longer execute. His spirit wants to channel energy in ways that would literally tear his current form apart. So he has to go slowly, rebuilding from the ground up, establishing new neural pathways and energy channels that can handle the power he'll eventually recover. It's frustrating work. Imagine being a master pianist who wakes up in a new body with completely different hands. You remember every piece you ever played, understand every principle of music theory, but your fingers won't cooperate. You have to retrain them, starting with simple scales, even though your mind is screaming to play complex sonatas. That's what our protagonist deals with every single day. But frustration is just another teacher. and he's always been an excellent student. After his morning practice, he makes his way to the Half-Blood District's marketplace. It's a chaotic place, full of vendors selling everything from stolen goods to questionable spiritual medicines. Most purebloods wouldn't be caught dead here, which makes it perfect for gathering information. Because here's a secret that powerful people always forget. The people at the bottom of society see everything. They're invisible to those above them, which means they witness every secret transaction, every whispered conspiracy, every moment of vulnerability from their supposed betters. And if you know how to ask, if you treat them with even a modicum of respect, they'll share information that could topple kingdoms. Our protagonist becomes a regular at a small food stall run by a man named Old Way. The food is terrible, greasy noodles swimming in questionable broth. But Old Way knows everything that happens in the city. 3 copper coins for a bowl of noodles and the latest gossip. It's the best investment our protagonist makes all week. Did you hear about the Crimson Phoenix sect? Old Way asks one morning, slurping his own bowl of noodles. Apparently, their young master got into some kind of incident last week. Kid's been seeing doctors nonstop, complaining about nightmares and phantom pressure crushing him. Our protagonist keeps his expression neutral. Really? What do they think caused it? Who knows? Rich kids and their problems, right? Probably just stress from too much cultivation and not enough real work. Old Way laughs at his own joke. But speaking of the Crimson Phoenix sect, you should be careful. They've been sending people into the Half-Blood District more often lately. Looking for someone, though nobody seems to know who. Looking for someone here? That's unusual. Right. Word is one of their disciples insulted the wrong person, and now they're trying to figure out who actually put their precious young master in his place. They're questioning everyone, getting aggressive about it too. Couple of folks got beat up yesterday just for not answering fast enough. This is interesting information. The sect is taking the incident more seriously than he expected. They must have sensed something unusual about the spiritual pressure he used, which means he needs to be more careful about using his power, at least until he's strong enough that it doesn't matter who comes looking. Thanks for the warning, Old Way. I'll keep my head down. Smart kid. Hey, speaking of smart, I've got a question for you. You're new to the district, right? Where'd you learn martial arts? I've seen you practicing in the morning. Our protagonist pauses. This is a dangerous moment. Old Way is observant. Too observant for a simple food vendor. There's more to this man than meets the eye. Picked up bits and pieces here and there. Why do you ask? Because your forms are weird, Old Way says bluntly. I've been around martial artists my whole life. Served in the military before I lost my leg and ended up in this district. I've practitioners from every major sect, watched countless styles and techniques. But your movements? They're like nothing I've ever seen. Too old somehow. Like watching someone practice a martial art that doesn't exist anymore. The accuracy of that observation sends a chill down our protagonist's spine. This random food vendor just casually identified something that should be impossible to detect. You've got a good eye, he says carefully. Let's just say I learned from some very old texts. Old texts, huh? Old Way nods slowly. Well, old doesn't mean useless. Sometimes the old ways work better than all this modern nonsense with bloodlines and hereditary techniques. You keep practicing, kid. Something tells me you're going to surprise a lot of people. After finishing his noodles, our protagonist continues his daily routine, which primarily consists of observing the city's power dynamics. He watches how guards patrol, how merchants conduct business, how cultivators from various sects interact with each other and with the lower classes. Every detail is filed away, added to the growing mental map he's building of this new world structure. But his most interesting discovery comes during one of these observation sessions, when he witnesses something that makes him realize just how corrupt this new martial world has become. It happens in the Central Plaza, a large open space where cultivators often gather to trade, socialize, or show off their skills. He's watching from a distance when a commotion breaks out. A young half-blood woman, maybe 19 or 20 years old, is being dragged toward the plaza's center by 2 guards. She's crying, begging, clearly terrified. A crowd gathers, but not to help. They gather to watch. A portly official steps forward, unrolling a scroll. By order of the city magistrate, the half-blood known as Mei Ling is accused of theft. She allegedly stole spiritual herbs from the Azure Cloud sect's medicinal garden. The evidence has been reviewed, and she has been found guilty. Her punishment, as dictated by law, is public humiliation, followed by 10 years of indentured servitude. "I didn't steal anything," the young woman screams. "Please, I'm innocent. They're lying." But nobody listens. The guards force her to her knees. One of them produces a branding iron, heated until it glows orange. The crowd watches with a mixture of indifference and morbid curiosity as they prepare to mark her face, a permanent symbol of her supposed crime. Our protagonist watches this scene, and something inside him, something that's been dormant for 1,000 years, stirs awake. It's rage, pure, cold rage at the injustice of it all. Because he can see what everyone else either can't or won't acknowledge. This is a setup. The official is sweating, despite the cool morning air. The guards keep glancing at someone in the crowd, a young disciple from the Azure Cloud sect, who's watching with a satisfied smirk. The young woman's desperation is too genuine, too raw to be an act. This isn't justice. This is powerful people destroying someone powerless because they can. The old him, the martial god who ruled through absolute power, would have simply killed everyone involved and moved on. But he's trying to be smarter this time, more strategic, less godlike. So instead of revealing his power, he does something far more interesting. He walks into the plaza, moving through the crowd until he's standing near the front. Then, in a voice that's loud enough to carry but not aggressive, he asks a simple question. By what evidence was she convicted? The official looks annoyed at the interruption. The evidence is sealed, as is proper for cases involving sect business. Sealed evidence for a public trial, that seems unusual. Who are you to question the magistrate's procedures, half-blood? The official spits the last word like an insult. Just someone curious about justice, our protagonist replies calmly. See, I was near the Azure Cloud sect's medicinal garden 3 nights ago. Couldn't sleep, went for a walk, and I happened to see something interesting. This is a complete lie, but the official doesn't know that. Neither does the young Azure Cloud sect disciple, who's suddenly paying very close attention. I saw a young man, maybe 17 or 18, with the Azure Cloud sect's outer disciple robes. He was carrying a bag that seemed quite heavy, sneaking away from the medicinal garden around midnight. Seemed odd, someone sneaking around their own sect's property like that. Almost like he was stealing something. The young disciple's face goes pale. You're lying. I was never... And there it is. The admission. Because our protagonist never said it was him. Never described his features, but the guilty conscience revealed itself. The crowd murmurs. Even they can see what just happened. The official tries to recover the situation. This is clearly a distraction tactic. Guards, remove this troublemaker. But before the guards can move, Old Wei's voice cuts through the plaza. Funny thing about that night. I remember it because I was up late, couldn't sleep, and I saw exactly what this young man just described. A disciple from the Azure Cloud sect, carrying a heavy bag, looking suspicious as hell. Didn't think much of it at the time. Figured it was sect business. But now that we're talking about stolen herbs... Other voices join in. A merchant. A guard from a different shift. A old woman who runs a tea house. One by one, people who had no reason to speak up are suddenly remembering details from that night. And while our protagonist knows most of them are probably lying, jumping on the bandwagon to see where this goes, it doesn't matter. What matters is the story is falling apart. The young Azure Cloud sect disciple tries to leave, but the crowd blocks his way. Not aggressively, but firmly. And suddenly he realizes he's trapped by the very spectacle he came to enjoy. What happens next is predictable. Accusations, denials, eventually, truth. The young disciple had indeed stolen herbs from his own sect's garden, planning to sell them and blame the theft on some convenient half-blood. He'd even paid the official to make sure the case was handled appropriately. The young woman is released. The disciple is taken into custody. The official is removed from his position. Justice, at least in this small moment, prevails. And through it all, our protagonist remains in the background, just another face in the crowd, notable only for asking one question at the right time. That's the first lesson he teaches this new world. You don't need overwhelming power to change outcomes. Sometimes all it takes is asking the right question at the right moment. But this small victory reveals something important to him. There are good people in this world, even at the bottom of society. People who want to do the right thing but are usually too afraid or powerless to act. All they need is a spark, a catalyst, someone willing to take that first dangerous step. He can be that catalyst. And unlike his first lifetime, when he fought alone at the peak, this time he'll build something better, something that can outlast any individual, no matter how powerful. A revolution doesn't start with strength. It starts with questions that people are afraid to ask. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Because hiding your power is one thing, but there comes a point where circumstances force your hand. And for our protagonist, that point comes faster than he anticipated. It's been 3 weeks since his awakening. 3 weeks of careful observation and slow cultivation. He's recovered maybe 5% of his former strength, barely enough to be considered a novice cultivator by current standards, though his technique and understanding remain leagues beyond anyone in this city. He's doing his usual evening routine, practicing basic forms in the courtyard when he senses something wrong. It's subtle, just a slight disturbance in the ambient spiritual energy. But his instincts, honed over countless battles, immediately go on alert. Someone is watching him. He doesn't stop his practice or acknowledge the presence. Instead, he extends his spiritual sense, carefully probing the area. And what he finds makes his blood run cold. There's a formation array surrounding the entire half-blood district. A massive one, powered by spiritual stones worth more than the entire district combined. And it's not just any formation, it's a sealing array, specifically designed to trap and suppress spiritual energy. Someone's planning to turn the entire district into a cage. He finishes his current form and heads back inside, moving at a casual pace that doesn't betray his racing thoughts. The formation isn't active yet. Probably won't be triggered until late night when everyone's asleep, which gives him maybe 4 hours to figure out what's happening and how to stop it. Back in his room, he sits in meditation, but he's not cultivating. He's analyzing the formation array, using his spiritual sense to trace its structure. It's expertly crafted, combining elements from several ancient sealing techniques with modern spiritual engineering. Whoever designed this knew their craft. But more importantly, whoever designed this had resources. Serious resources. The kind that only major sects or wealthy noble houses possess. A knock on his door interrupts his analysis. He opens it to find Grandmother Chen standing there, her usual stern expression even more severe than usual. "Something bad is coming," she says without preamble. "Can you feel it?" He's surprised. "You can sense the formation?" "I'm a half-blood, not blind," she says dryly. "Been alive long enough to recognize when powerful people are planning something terrible. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Me? Why would I do anything?" She looks at him with those sharp eyes that seem to see too much. "Because you're not what you pretend to be. Don't know what you are exactly, but you're not some random half-blood who wandered into my building. So I'll ask again. What are you going to do about it?" He considers lying, maintaining his cover. But something about this old woman's directness and the severity of the situation makes him choose honesty. How many people in this district could evacuate on short notice? None. Where would they go? Every district in the city is controlled by someone. Half-bloods don't get to just wander around freely. Then I'll have to disable the formation. She stares at him for a long moment. You know what that array is? A sealing formation. Large scale. Once activated, it'll trap everyone inside and suppress their spiritual energy. Perfect for whatever they're planning to do to a district full of people who won't be missed. Her expression darkens. Can you actually disable something that size? 3 weeks ago, no. Today. He pauses, calculating. Today, maybe. If I'm willing to reveal more of my strength than I'd prefer. Then reveal it. Because I've seen what happens when powerful people decide that half-bloods are expendable. She rolls up her sleeve, revealing a brand mark on her arm. Old, faded, but clearly similar to the one they were going to give that young woman in the plaza. I survived one massacre. I'm too old to survive another. The word massacre crystallizes everything. This isn't just a trap. It's preparation for something far worse. He needs more information. Fast. Which means he needs to do something he's been avoiding. Actively using his spiritual sense in a way that might attract attention. Tell everyone to stay in their homes tonight, he tells Grandmother Chen. Lock the doors, cover the windows, and no matter what they hear outside, don't come out until morning. You're going hunting, she says. It's not a question. I'm going to have a conversation with whoever set up this formation, very thoroughly. An hour later, he's moving across the rooftops of the half-blood district like a ghost. His improved strength isn't much, but it's enough for this. Enhanced speed, better balance, the ability to channel spiritual energy to his legs for longer jumps. To anyone watching, he'd appear as little more than a shadow, there and gone before they could focus. He finds the formation's control node on the roof of an abandoned warehouse at the district's edge. And guarding it are 3 cultivators, all wearing the symbols of the Thunder Fist sect, one of the city's major powers, known for their aggressive expansion tactics and complete disregard for anything resembling ethics. 2 of the cultivators are novices, probably outer disciples assigned to guard duty. But the third is different. He's a core disciple, maybe early 20s, with spiritual pressure that marks him as someone who's reached the Foundation establishment realm. By current standards, he's considered a genius, someone who achieved in 20 years what most take 40 to accomplish. By our protagonist's standards, he's a child playing with powers he doesn't understand. But that child can still do a lot of damage, and our protagonist is nowhere near strong enough to fight directly. So he does what any intelligent person would do when outmatched. He cheats. The warehouse has a faulty beam, weakened by age and rot. Our protagonist noticed it during his earlier scouting. A beam that holds up part of the roof structure. A beam that, if struck in exactly the right place with exactly the right amount of force, would cause a very localized collapse. He positions himself on the far side of the roof, gathers what spiritual energy he can muster, and launches a carefully aimed strike. Not at the cultivators, at the beam. The wood splinters with a crack like thunder. Part of the roof collapses inward, and the 3 cultivators have exactly 2 seconds to react before debris starts falling on the control node they're supposed to be protecting. They do what anyone would do. They try to protect it. The core disciple throws up a spiritual barrier, channeling his energy to deflect the falling stones and broken wood. The 2 novices rush to stabilize the surrounding structure, which means all 3 have their backs to our protagonist when he drops down behind them. "Evening, gentlemen," he says pleasantly. "Lovely night for sealing formations, isn't it?" They spin around, spiritual energy flaring as they prepare for combat. The core disciple looks him over, takes in the shabby clothes, the weak spiritual pressure, the apparent age of maybe 25, and visibly relaxes. Just a half-blood who wandered where he shouldn't. Kill him quietly, then fix the roof. The two novices move forward, drawing weapons. They're not even worried. After all, what threat could a random half-blood possibly pose? What happens next happens so fast that the core disciple barely processes it. The first novice swings his sword in a basic overhead strike. Competent, properly executed, but completely predictable. Our protagonist doesn't bother dodging. Instead, he steps inside the strike's range, where the sword loses its cutting power and delivers a palm strike to the novice's solar plexus. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to disrupt his spiritual flow and knock him unconscious. The second novice, seeing his companion fall, panics and channels his spiritual energy into a technique, Lightning Fist, the sect's signature move that covers the user's hand in crackling electrical energy. It's actually a pretty good technique, efficient and powerful when properly executed. Unfortunately for him, our protagonist learned to counter lightning-based attacks about 600 years ago. He doesn't try to block or dodge. Instead, he grounds himself, literally channeling a bit of his spiritual energy through his feet into the earth, and lets the lightning attack flow through him harmlessly. The novice's shocked expression, pun intended, is almost comical as he watches his most powerful technique do absolutely nothing. Then our protagonist grabs his extended arm, uses his own momentum against him, and sends him flipping over the edge of the roof. Don't worry, it's only a 12-foot drop, and there's a pile of old cloth sacks below. He'll wake up tomorrow with a concussion and bruised pride, nothing more. The core disciple is now paying attention. He sizes up the situation. His two guards down in seconds, this strange half-blood standing there calmly, and begins to seriously channel his spiritual energy. "You're not a normal half-blood," he says, spiritual pressure building around him like a visible aura. "Who are you really?" "Someone who's about to ruin your evening. That formation you're building, it's getting dismantled. The question is whether you're going to let me do it peacefully, or whether this needs to get messy." The core disciple laughs. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I'm Fang Zhuo, core disciple of the Thunder Fist sect. I've reached foundation establishment. There's no way a weak half-blood like you could possibly..." He doesn't get to finish the sentence, because our protagonist has heard enough monologuing for 1 millennium. Now remember how I said our protagonist has recovered maybe 5% of his former power? That 5% is deceptive, because he's not using it like a normal cultivator would. A normal cultivator at his current level would channel spiritual energy inefficiently, waste most of it on flashy displays, and rely on their sect's techniques without really understanding them. Our protagonist doesn't do any of that. Every ounce of spiritual energy he has is used with perfect precision. Every movement is optimized for maximum effect, with minimum effort. And instead of relying on learned techniques, he's using fundamental principles of energy manipulation that most modern cultivators have completely forgotten. Case in point, when Fang Zhuo launches a lightning fist attack, properly executed this time, with enough power to punch through solid stone, our protagonist doesn't try to block or counter it. Instead, he does something that shouldn't be possible at his level. He uses a technique called borrowed force, one of the ancient principles that most people don't even know exists anymore. The idea is simple. Instead of opposing force with force, you become part of the incoming attack's flow, redirect its energy, and send it back to its source amplified. In practice, it's incredibly difficult and dangerous. If you miscalculate by even a fraction, the technique fails, and you take the full force of the attack. It requires perfect timing, perfect positioning, and an understanding of energy flow that goes beyond what most cultivators ever achieve. Our protagonist executes it flawlessly. He shifts sideways at the last possible moment, catching Fang Zhuo's extended arm and spinning with the attack's momentum. The electrical energy meant to blow him apart instead flows through him, redirected back toward its source through their point of contact. Fang Zhuo's own technique, amplified and modified, hits him like a truck. He flies backward, crashes into the formation's control node, and the impact disrupts the carefully aligned spiritual stones. The entire formation array flickers, its energy patterns suddenly unstable. Fang Zhuo struggles to his feet, coughing blood. His spiritual energy is in chaos, his meridians damaged from having his own attack reflected back at him. He looks at our protagonist with a mixture of fear and disbelief. What? What are you? Someone who lived through an era when cultivators actually understood what they were doing. Our protagonist replies, walking toward the control node. Someone who remembers that spiritual energy is a tool, not a status symbol. Someone who's very tired of seeing powerful people abuse those who can't fight back. He reaches the control node and places his hand on it, spiritual sense flowing into the formation array. And here's where his true expertise shines. Because dismantling a formation isn't like breaking down a wall. You can't just smash it apart. Formations are interconnected patterns of energy, and if you disrupt them wrong, they explode with devastating force. But our protagonist doesn't need to dismantle it. He just needs to reprogram it. His fingers move across the control node's surface, spiritual energy flowing from his fingertips, rewriting the formation's basic instructions. It takes about 3 minutes. 3 minutes during which Fang Zhuo lies there, too injured to move but aware enough to watch in horror as this supposedly weak half-blood casually reconfigures a formation that took his sect's master formation expert 3 days to design. When he's done, the formation is still active. It's just not targeting the half-blood district anymore. It's targeting the Thunder Fist sect's headquarters. What did you do? Fang Zhuo whispers. Insurance, our protagonist says. That formation was designed to trap and suppress spiritual energy, right? Well, now it's centered on your sect instead. If I don't actively come here every night to maintain the new configuration, it automatically activates. So if anything happens to me, if any more cultivators show up to cause trouble, in this district, if anyone even looks at these half-bloods wrong, well, your entire sect gets to experience what you were planning to inflict on innocent people. He turns to leave, then pauses and looks back. Oh, and Fang Zhuo? When you report back to your superiors, and I know you will, deliver a message for me. Tell them that the half-blood district is under protection now, not by me specifically, but by the principle that every action has consequences. They can test whether I'm bluffing if they want. But given what just happened to you, do they really want to take that risk? With that, he jumps off the roof, leaving behind a wounded core disciple and a formation that's now a ticking time bomb aimed at one of the city's major sects. He makes it back to his building and his room without incident. Only then does he allow himself to feel the exhaustion. That confrontation took more energy than he could safely spare. His spiritual reserves are completely depleted. Every muscle in his body is screaming. He's probably set his recovery back by at least a week. But as he lies in his small bed, listening to the sounds of the half-blood district settling in for the night, people who don't know how close they came to disaster, who'll wake up tomorrow safe because of actions they'll never even know about, he finds himself smiling. Because this is what power is actually for. Not domination. Not showing off. Not building monuments to your own ego. It's for protecting people who can't protect themselves. For standing between the strong and the weak. For making sure that strength serves humanity, rather than exploiting it. It's a lesson he learned once before, 1,000 years ago. A lesson he forgot in his pursuit of absolute power. A lesson that cost him everything when the very people he thought he was protecting sealed him away out of fear. But he's learned it again now. And this time he won't forget. This time, he'll build something better than just personal strength. He'll build a system, a philosophy, a revolution that can't be sealed away or forgotten. This time, he'll change the world for good. Word spreads faster than wildfire when a major sect gets publicly humiliated. And when that sect is the Thunder Fist sect, known throughout the region for their pride and their tendency to respond to insults with overwhelming violence, well, things get interesting real quick. Our protagonist hears the news 3 days after his confrontation with Fang Zhuo. He's at Old Wei's noodle stall, slowly working through his morning bowl. He's actually developed a taste for the terrible food, mostly because consistency is comforting in a world that's changed beyond recognition. When Old Wei leans in conspiratorially. "Something big happened at the Thunder Fist sect," he whispers, glancing around to make sure nobody's listening too closely. "My nephew works in their outer district as a gardener. Says the whole sect's been in chaos for days. Core disciples, running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Some kind of formation problem that's got the sect elders panicking." "Really?" Our protagonist keeps his tone carefully neutral. "What kind of formation problem?" "Nobody knows the details. It's all very hush-hush. But apparently one of their core disciples got beat up pretty badly, and now there's some kind of insurance, he called it. Whatever it means, the sect master's been in emergency meetings nonstop." "Interesting. So they've verified the threat and taken it seriously. That's good." But Old Wei said something else that catches his attention. "Your nephew works for the sect?" "Yeah, has for 20 years. Good job, steady pay, doesn't cause trouble. About as good as a half-blood can hope for in this city." Old Wei's expression grows more serious. "But here's the thing. Normally, the sect doesn't care about half-blood workers. We're furniture to them, barely worth noticing. But yesterday, guards went through questioning every half-blood employee. My nephew said they showed him a formation pattern, asked if he'd seen anyone who could work with formations like that. He said no, obviously, but they're looking for someone. Yeah, someone with formation expertise far beyond what they expected to find in the half-blood district. My nephew says the sect elders are convinced it's some master formation expert who's hiding their true cultivation level." Old Wei chuckles. "Can you imagine some grandmaster hiding out in our district? As if anyone that powerful would voluntarily live in these conditions." Our protagonist smiles and continues eating his noodles. If only Old Wei knew how accurate that assessment actually is. But the information is valuable. The Thunder Fist sect is actively searching for him, and they're approaching it methodically, which means he needs to be more careful. His confrontation with Fang Zhuo was necessary, but it's drawn attention. The kind of attention that could unravel his carefully maintained cover. He needs allies. People who can help protect his identity while he continues to grow stronger. And he needs them fast, before the Thunder Fist sect's investigation gets too close. The question is, who can he trust? The answer comes from an unexpected source. That evening, as he's returning to his building, he finds Grandmother Chen waiting in the courtyard. But she's not alone. With her are 3 other people, all of them older, all of them half-bloods, and all of them looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and calculation that suggests they know more than they should. "We need to talk," Grandmother Chen says. "Inside. Privacy is important." They gather in her room on the first floor, which is slightly larger than his, and contains what appears to be a small shrine in one corner. Interesting detail he files away for later. Once the door is closed, and he senses Grandmother Chen activate some kind of privacy formation. Another surprise. Where did she learn to do that? The conversation begins. "These are the elders of the half-blood district," she explains, gesturing to her companions. "Elder Li runs the Workers' Guild. Elder Zhao manages what passes for our medical services, and Elder Wang coordinates information between the district's various sub-communities. We've been running this place quietly for 30 years, making sure half-bloods survive in a city that wants us dead." "I didn't know the district was that organized," our protagonist admits. "That's because you weren't supposed to," Elder Li says. He's a thin man with intelligent eyes and hands that bear the calluses of someone who's worked hard labor for decades. "We stay invisible. It's the only way to survive. Pure bloods see what they want to see. A district full of disorganized, desperate half-bloods barely scraping by. They don't see the networks, the support systems, the quiet coordination that keeps us all alive." "We know what you did," Grandmother Chen says, getting straight to the point. 3 nights ago, the formation that was targeting our district. You dealt with it." He considers denying it, but the look in their eyes tells him they already know. "How did you find out?" "Because we're not idiots," Elder Zhao says bluntly. She's a heavy-set woman with hands stained by medicinal herbs. That night, there were 4 of us who could sense the formation array. We've been preparing for something like this. When you live in a district full of people that society considers disposable, you learn to watch for danger. We felt the array being established, felt it building power, and then we felt it change, redirect, something no normal half-blood could have done. So we watched you, Elder Wong adds. He's the oldest of the group, probably in his 70s, with a scar across his face that speaks of old violence. Watched you leave that night. Watched you come back 2 hours later, exhausted. Watched the Thunder Fist sect cultivators abandon their positions and leave in a panic. Didn't take a genius to connect the dots. Our protagonist sits back, reassessing these 4 people. They're far more capable than they appear. More organized, more aware, more dangerous. So what happens now? Are you going to turn me in for whatever reward the Thunder Fist sect is offering? Grandmother Chen laughs at that, a harsh sound without humor. Turn you in? Boy, you saved this entire district. We're here to figure out how to help you. That stops him. Help me? Why? Because for the first time in 30 years, Elder Lee says, someone actually stood up to the sects. Someone actually said no more and backed it up with action. Do you have any idea what that means to us? What it means to thousands of half-bloods who've spent their whole lives being told they're worthless? It means hope, Elder Zhao continues. Real hope, not the empty kind that politicians promise. You've proven that the sects can be challenged, that their power isn't absolute, that someone with skill and intelligence can stand against them even without matching their cultivation level. You've also painted a target on your back, Elder Wong adds practically. The Thunder Fist sect won't stop looking. Eventually they'll figure out who you are. When that happens, you'll need friends. People who can provide cover, misdirection, information. That's what we're offering. Our protagonist considers this carefully. He's been operating alone since awakening, maintaining his independence, avoiding entanglements. It's safer that way. No one to betray him, no one to use against him, no one whose weakness he has to accommodate. But alone is also limited. Alone means he can only be in one place at a time. Alone means he has to handle every problem personally. Alone means he can't build anything that lasts beyond himself. And most importantly, alone is what led to his downfall the first time. What exactly are you proposing? He asks. Grandmother Chen smiles. A partnership. You protect the district, which you were apparently going to do anyway. We provide you with resources, information, and cover. We have connections throughout the city, workers in every major sect, servants in noble houses, merchants who hear everything. That's a network of intelligence worth more than cultivation manuals. And we ask for very little in return, Elder Lee adds. Just keep doing what you're doing. Stand up to the sects when they overstep. Protect those who can't protect themselves. Show this city that half-bloods aren't the weak, helpless victims everyone assumes we are. It's a good offer. Maybe too good, which makes him suspicious. There has to be more to it than that. What are you not telling me? The 4 elders exchange glances. Finally, Elder Wong speaks. 28 years ago, there was a massacre in the Eastern District. A sect wanted to expand their territory, and the half-bloods living there were in the way. So they manufactured evidence of a disease outbreak, sealed the district, and cleaned it out. 3,000 people died in one night. The official records say it was a plague. We know better. I survived that massacre, Grandmother Chen says quietly. Was 23 years old, newly married, 3 months pregnant. Lost everything that night. My husband, my unborn child, my home. Made it out only because I was visiting a friend in another district when it happened. We rebuilt, Elder Zhao continues. Created this community, these networks, these systems. Swore it would never happen again, that we'd see it coming next time and be ready. But ready how? We're half-bloods. We have minimal cultivation, No legal rights, no recourse to justice. What were we supposed to do if another sect decided we were inconvenient? The picture becomes clear. You've been waiting for someone like me. Not specifically you, Elder Lee says, but someone who could fight back. Someone with the skill and the power to challenge the sect's authority. Someone who gives a damn whether half-bloods live or die. We've been watching for years, hoping, and now you show up. You understand what you're asking? Our protagonist looks at each of them in turn. If I agree to this, if I become the person you're hoping for, the Thunderfist sect won't be the only ones coming after me. Every sect in the region will see me as a threat. The pressure will be constant. The danger will be enormous. We know, they say in unison. And you're sure you want to tie your fates to someone who's essentially declared war on the existing power structure? Boy, Grandmother Chen says, and her voice carries the weight of someone who's seen too much pain and refuses to see more. We've been at war with the existing power structure since the day we were born. The only difference is that now we might actually have a chance to win. He makes his decision. All right, I'm in. But we do this smart. No reckless actions, no unnecessary risks. We build slowly, carefully, until we're strong enough that they can't just crush us whenever they want. Can you work with that? 4 simultaneous nods. Good. Then let's start with what you know about the Thunderfist sect's search. What are they looking for? How close are they to finding me? And most importantly, do they know about you 4? What follows is a 3-hour strategy session that would put most military councils to shame. The elders have been gathering intelligence for decades, and they share it freely. Names, locations, sect politics, hidden alliances, secret grudges. It's a treasure trove of information that transforms our protagonist's understanding of the city's power dynamics. He learns that the Thunderfist sect isn't actually the most powerful faction in the city. They're merely the most aggressive. The true power lies with the Heaven's Gate Academy, an ancient institution that trains the region's elite cultivators. The academy maintains strict neutrality in sect politics, but their graduates hold positions of influence everywhere. Cross the academy, and you cross everyone. He learns about the underground black markets, where cultivation resources are traded illegally. About the corrupt city guard that takes bribes from every sect. About the merchant guilds that secretly manipulate commodity prices. About the hidden tensions between the city's human population and the small minority of spiritual beast cultivators who live on the outskirts. Most importantly, he learns that the Thunderfist sect's investigation is following 3 lines of inquiry. First, they're searching for known formation experts who might be in hiding. Second, they're looking for anyone who's recently entered the city with suspicious timing. Third, and this is the one that worries him most, they're investigating anyone who survived from previous eras, anyone who might be using secret techniques to hide their true age. That third line of inquiry shows intelligence that makes him recalculate his assessment of the Thunderfist sect. Someone over there is smart enough to consider impossible possibilities, which means he needs to be extra careful about not demonstrating knowledge or techniques that would mark him as ancient. We can help with misdirection, Elder Wong offers. I have contacts among the city's information brokers. For the right price, we can plant false leads, make them chase ghosts, buy you time. Do it. Our protagonist agrees. But carefully. We don't want to look like we're deliberately sabotaging their investigation. That would just confirm I'm in the half-blood district. Make it subtle. A rumor here, a suspicious figure there, keep their attention scattered. What about training? Elder Lee asks. You're clearly rebuilding your cultivation. Is there anything we can provide to help speed that process? It's a good question. His recovery has been agonizingly slow, limited by both his damaged cultivation base and the scarcity of spiritual resources. Any assistance would significantly accelerate his return to power. Spiritual stones would help. High-grade ones if you can get them, though even low-grade would be useful. Also, any ancient cultivation manuals you might have access to, not the modern sect techniques, but older texts from before the bloodline obsession took over. And he pauses, considering whether to reveal this need, then decides they've earned his trust. I need information about sealing techniques, specifically methods for breaking or weakening powerful seals. The last request gets their attention. Elder Zhao studies him carefully. That's oddly specific. Are you trying to break a seal that's on you? Something like that. My situation is complicated. Let's just say there are restrictions on my power beyond simple depletion. Understanding more about advanced sealing techniques might help me work around them. It's not exactly a lie, though it's not the complete truth either. The seal that imprisoned him for 1,000 years is gone, but its effects linger. His spiritual pathways are damaged in ways that normal cultivation can't fully fix. He needs to understand the seal that was used on him. Need to know how to repair the damage it left behind. We'll see what we can find, Grandmother Chen promises. But understand, resources like that aren't easy to get for half-bloods. It'll take time, and it might cost more than just money. What kind of cost? Favors, debts. The underground market runs on trust and reciprocity. If we call in the favors necessary to get what you need, we'll owe favors in return. Are you willing to help us repay those debts? Depends on what they are. I'm not going to hurt innocent people or do something that violates my principles. But if it's reasonable, yes, I'll help. Fair enough. They talk for another hour, establishing protocols for communication, dead drops for exchanging information, emergency signals if things go wrong. It's all very organized, and our protagonist finds himself impressed by how sophisticated their network is. By the time the meeting ends and he returns to his room, dawn is approaching. He's exhausted but also energized in a way he hasn't felt since awakening. Because for the first time, he's not alone. He has allies. People who share his goals, who understand the stakes, who are willing to fight alongside him. It reminds him of his early days, centuries ago, when he was just a talented young cultivator gathering a small group of like-minded warriors. Before politics and power corrupted everything. Before fear and jealousy destroyed those bonds. He won't make the same mistakes this time. This time, he'll build something that can't be destroyed by taking out one person. He'll create a movement, a philosophy, a network that's bigger than any individual. But first, he needs to survive the Thunderfist sect's investigation. Which means it's time to be proactive. The best defense, after all, is a good offense. And he has a plan that's going to make the Thunderfist sect very, very uncomfortable. The Thunderfist sect's headquarters is an impressive complex built into the side of Thunder Peak Mountain. The main hall alone could fit 3,000 people comfortably, and the various training grounds, libraries, and residential quarters spread across multiple levels carved directly into the rock. It's a statement of wealth and power, designed to intimidate visitors and remind disciples that they belong to something greater than themselves. Right now, that impressive headquarters is the site of an emergency council meeting that's been going for 6 hours, with no signs of reaching a conclusion. Sect Master Feng Tian sits at the head of the council table, his spiritual pressure radiating outward in waves that make the air itself feel heavy. He's a man in his late 40s who reached the core formation realm 20 years ago, making him one of the youngest sect masters in the region's history. His rise to power was built on decisive action, overwhelming force, and an absolute refusal to show weakness, which makes the current situation particularly galling. Let me make sure I understand correctly, he says, his voice dangerously calm. One of our core disciples, a Foundation establishment cultivator, mind you, was defeated by an unknown half-blood who then hijacked our formation array and turned it into a weapon aimed at this very sect. Is that accurate? Fang Zhuo, still recovering from his injuries, nods miserably from his seat. His face is pale and he's clearly in pain despite the healing pills he's been taking. Yes, Sect Master. I didn't see it coming. He moved too fast, countered every technique I used, and his understanding of formations far exceeded anything I've encountered before. A half-blood, Sect Master Feng repeats, making the term sound like an accusation. You were defeated by a half-blood. With respect, Sect Master, Elder Yan speaks up from further down the table. She's the sect's formation master, an elderly woman who's been studying spiritual arrays for 60 years. I've examined Fang Zhuo's wounds and analyzed the modified formation array. Whoever did this wasn't just skilled, they were expert level. The modifications to our formation demonstrate understanding of principles that most modern formation specialists don't even know exist. Are you saying this wasn't a half-blood? I'm saying that whoever this person is, their bloodline status is irrelevant. Their formation knowledge alone marks them as someone who studied ancient texts, possibly original source material from before the Sundering. That level of expertise typically takes decades to acquire. So what are you suggesting? That some ancient formation master is hiding in the half-blood district pretending to be weak? I'm suggesting, Elder Yan says carefully, that we may be dealing with someone who's survived from a previous era. Someone who's using the half-blood identity as cover while they do whatever it is they're doing. The implications of that statement ripple through the council chamber. Cultivators who survive from previous eras are rare, but not unheard of. Some use life extension techniques. Others enter suspended animation in hidden chambers, waiting for specific conditions to awaken. And sometimes, very rarely, powerful cultivators who were sealed away manage to break free centuries later. All of these scenarios represent potential threats that a sect can't simply ignore. Have we identified any candidates who fit that profile? Sect Master Feng asks. 17 possibles, Elder Chen responds. He's the sect's intelligence officer, a thin man with sharp eyes who spent 30 years gathering secrets. I've had agents investigating every unusual occurrence in the Half-Blood District for the past 3 weeks. Cross-referenced with arrival dates, skill demonstrations, unusual behavior patterns, and reports from our embedded assets. He activates a projection formation, and images appear in the air above the council table. Faces, names, brief descriptions. Our protagonist is among them, listed as unknown male, late 20s, minimal cultivation detected, suspicious behavior patterns. Narrow it down, Sect Master Feng commands. I don't have resources to investigate 17 people simultaneously. Who are the top 3 candidates? Elder Chen manipulates the projection, and most of the images disappear, leaving 3 faces. These 3 showed the most suspicious indicators. First candidate is a woman in her 30s who demonstrated expert-level medical knowledge when treating an injured child last week. Second is a man in his 50s who was observed performing movement techniques that our analysts say are from a style that disappeared 200 years ago. Third is this one, male, late 20s, minimal observable cultivation, but he's been seen practicing forms that Elder Yan says resemble ancient martial techniques. That third image is our protagonist. Sect Master Feng studies the image. What do we know about him? Very little. Arrived in the district 3 weeks ago, almost exactly when Fang Zhuo reported the confrontation. Rents a room from an old woman named Chen, who runs a boarding house. Keeps to himself mostly, though he's been seen at a noodle stall owned by a vendor named Wei. No obvious income source, no connections to any known organizations. That's not suspicious, Fang Zhuo speaks up. That's normal for half-bloods in that district. Agreed, Elder Chen nods, which is precisely what makes him suspicious. Most people trying to lay low make at least one mistake. They try too hard to seem normal, or they maintain habits from their previous life, or they demonstrate skills they shouldn't have. This one does none of that. His cover is perfect. Too perfect. Or he's actually just a normal half-blood who happens to know some old martial forms, Elder Yan points out. Possible, Elder Chen concedes. But here's the interesting part. I had agents watching all 3 candidates last night. The woman and the older man both went about normal evening routines. But this one? He manipulates the projection again, showing a surveillance report. This one spent 3 hours on his building's roof, apparently meditating. But according to our energy detection formations, there was unusual spiritual activity during that time. Subtle, barely detectable, but present. Could be cultivation practice, another elder suggests. At that level of subtlety? No. Normal cultivation, even basic level, creates more noticeable energy fluctuations. This was different. More like testing, experimenting, someone carefully probing their own energy reserves and pathways. Sect Master Feng leans forward. That does sound like someone recovering from damage or restriction. If this person was sealed for a long time, they'd need to carefully rebuild their cultivation base to avoid damaging themselves further. Exactly what I thought. Then we need to confirm. Elder Chen, I want this third candidate brought in for questioning. Quietly, no public scene. Make it look like routine checks that we're doing throughout the district. Don't give him reason to run or reveal his true power. And if he resists, then we'll know we've found our man. But I want him alive if possible. Someone with that level of formation knowledge is too valuable to simply kill. If we can turn him, recruit him into the sect, we'd gain an asset of tremendous worth. Elder Yan shakes her head. With respect, Sect Master, if this is indeed an ancient cultivator who was sealed away, there's probably a reason he was sealed. Trying to recruit someone like that could be extremely dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous, Elder Yan. That's how sects grow stronger. By taking calculated risks that our rivals are too afraid to attempt. The meeting continues for another hour, planning the operation to capture our protagonist. They don't know it yet, but every word of their conversation is being recorded. Because while the Thunder Fist sect has been investigating the Half-Blood District, our protagonist has been investigating them. And when you have allies who've spent decades building intelligence networks, and when you're willing to take risks that your enemies would never expect, you can accomplish some surprising things. Like planting a tiny listening formation inside the sect's council chamber. 3 hours later, back in the Half-Blood District, our protagonist sits in Grandmother Chen's room, listening to a recording of the entire meeting. The elders are with him, and their expressions range from worried to furious. They're coming for you. Elder Wang states the obvious. Tomorrow, maybe the day after, you need to run. No, our protagonist says calmly. Running would confirm their suspicions. And besides, where would I run to? Every city is the same. Sects controlling everything. Half-bloods oppressed. The strong abusing the weak. If I run here, I'll just have to face the same problems somewhere else. So what are you going to do? Grandmother Chen asks. You heard the sect master. They want to capture you alive, which means they'll come with overwhelming force. I heard something else too, our protagonist says. I heard a sect that's scared. They know someone out there can challenge them, and it's making them desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? He smiles, and there's something dangerous in that expression. The kind that expose what they're really afraid of. The kind that reveal secrets they've been keeping. The kind that turn public opinion against them. You're planning something, Elder Li says. It's not a question. I'm planning a lot of things. But first, I need to know, how far does your network extend? Do you have people inside the Thunder Fist sect itself? The 4 elders exchange glances. Maybe, Elder Wang says carefully. Why? Because I'm going to give the sect exactly what they want. They want to investigate me? Fine. I'll make myself available for questioning. But not on their terms. On mine. In public. Where everyone can see how one of the great sects treats a half-blood accused of defending his community. That's insane, Elder Zhao says flatly. You'll be walking into a trap. No, they'll be walking into mine, because while they're so focused on capturing one supposedly dangerous half-blood, they won't notice all the other things happening around them. What other things? Our protagonist stands and begins pacing, his mind working through the details of a plan that's taking shape. Tell me, what would happen if evidence surfaced that the Thunder Fist sect has been systematically exploiting half-blood labor? Not just using you as cheap workers, but actively stealing the fruits of your labor, claiming credit for work you did, taking resources you discovered and calling them sect property? That's already happening, Elder Lee says bitterly. Everyone knows it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares because there's no proof. It's all hearsay, rumors, complaints that can be dismissed. But what if there was documentation? Records, accounts, testimony from victims who can't be easily silenced? The sect would suppress it. They control the city guard, the magistrates, the information networks. They control those things now. But what if public opinion turned against them? What if other sects saw opportunity in their weakness? What if the Heaven's Gate Academy, which supposedly maintains standards of justice and fairness, was forced to investigate? Grandmother Chen's eyes widen as she realizes what he's suggesting. You want to start a propaganda war? I want to fight them the way they can't fight back, with truth. They're used to using force, intimidation, direct power. They don't know how to handle an enemy who attacks their reputation, their legitimacy, their moral authority. Even if we could gather that evidence, Elder Zhao says, how would we spread it? They control the information channels. They control the official channels, but there are other ways to spread information. Street performers, merchants' gossip networks, underground publications. Your people have been surviving in the shadows for decades. You know how to communicate without the authorities noticing. The elders are quiet, considering the audacity of what he's proposing. It's not just dangerous, it's potentially revolutionary. Because if one sect can be successfully challenged through public opinion rather than direct combat, it sets a precedent that could shake the entire power structure of the region. You understand what you're starting? Elder Wong asks seriously. This isn't just about you or this district anymore. You're talking about challenging the entire system that keeps sects in power. Yes. And you think you can succeed where everyone else has failed? Our protagonist stops pacing and looks at each of them in turn. I know I can succeed. Because I've done it before. 1,000 years ago, in a world very different from this one, I challenged a system that seemed unbreakable. I united disparate groups, exposed corruption, and toppled powers that seemed eternal. It cost me everything in the end. But I learned lessons from that failure. And this time, I won't make the same mistakes. There's a long moment of silence as the implications sink in. Then Grandmother Chen stands and walks to her small shrine. She lights incense and bows 3 times before turning back to the group. 30 years ago, I watched 3,000 people die because no one would stand up to power. I swore that would never happen again. If you're really offering a chance to change things, to build something better, then count me in, whatever it costs. One by one, the other elders stand and commit themselves to the plan. And with that, the pieces are set in motion for something that will shake the region to its foundations. The Thunder Fist sect thinks they're hunting one dangerous individual. They don't realize they're walking into a war they've already lost. The message arrives 2 days later, delivered by a junior sect disciple who looks uncomfortable with his assignment. It's formal, written on expensive paper with the Thunder Fist sect's seal stamped in red wax at the bottom. The language is polite, almost respectful, requesting that our protagonist present himself at the sect headquarters for routine questioning regarding recent unusual events in the city. He reads it twice, then hands it to Grandmother Chen, who's been waiting with him. She scans the contents and snorts. Routine questioning, as if anyone believes that. It's actually clever, our protagonist observes. If they'd sent guards to drag me away, it would look like aggression. This way, if I refuse to come voluntarily, they can claim I'm being uncooperative, maybe even guilty of something. Public opinion matters more than they want to admit. Are you really going to go? Absolutely, but not alone and not quietly. He turns to the junior disciple who's been standing there nervously. Tell your sect master that I'll come for questioning. Tomorrow at noon, in the Central Plaza. Public venue, public questioning. If he wants answers from me, everyone gets to hear them. The disciple's eyes widen. The sect master specified you should come to the sect headquarters? I'm sure he did. But I'm a half-blood, remember? I don't have the protections that cultivators enjoy. If I go into your sect headquarters, who's to say I'll come back out? At least in the central plaza, with witnesses everywhere, we can all be sure this stays civil. He smiles pleasantly. Unless, of course, the sect master has something to hide. The disciple doesn't know how to respond to that. He takes the message, the counter-proposal, and hurries away. You're insane, Grandmother Chen says, but there's approval in her voice. They'll bring overwhelming force. Let them. The more cultivators they bring to question one supposedly weak half-blood, the more ridiculous they look. And every person who watches will see what we want them to see. A powerful sect so afraid of the truth that they need an army to face one man. The next 20 hours are a flurry of preparation. The elders activate their networks, spreading word throughout the city that something significant is going to happen in the central plaza at noon. Not specific details, just enough to create curiosity. Merchants are quietly informed. Street performers are given suggestions about where they might find the best audiences tomorrow. Even some pure-blood cultivators who have grievances against the Thunderfist sect receive anonymous tips about an interesting event worth witnessing. By the time noon arrives the next day, the central plaza is packed. Easily 3,000 people have gathered, filling every available space. Some came because they heard rumors. Others came because they always gather when something unusual happens. Still others came because they sensed the spiritual pressure building in the area. When powerful cultivators gather, the energy becomes palpable even to normal people. Our protagonist arrives exactly at noon, walking through the crowd with calm confidence. He's wearing simple clothes, the kind any half-blood might wear, nothing special or intimidating. But the way he moves, the way he carries himself, there's something that makes people step aside without quite knowing why. The Thunderfist sect's delegation is already waiting in the plaza's center. Sect Master Feng Tian stands at the front, flanked by 6 elders and 24 disciples, all of them radiating spiritual pressure that makes the air feel thick and heavy. It's an impressive display of power, designed to intimidate. But our protagonist walks through that pressure like it doesn't exist, which immediately tells anyone paying attention that he's far more than he appears. You requested my presence? He says, his voice carrying clearly across the plaza, despite not being particularly loud. I'm here. What do you want to know? Sect Master Feng studies him for a long moment. Up close, he can sense something unusual about this young man's energy. It's subtle, carefully controlled, but there's a depth to it that shouldn't be possible at his apparent cultivation level. Your name, Feng Tian begins. I'm called Shen. Just Shen? No family name? Half-bloods don't usually have the luxury of family names, Sect Master. We're lucky if we have names at all. There's a murmur from the crowd at that. It's a pointed reminder of the discrimination half-bloods face, delivered with just enough edge to sting. Where did you learn formation techniques? Feng Tian continues, deciding to cut through the pleasantries. Books, mostly. Old texts I found here and there. One advantage of being considered worthless, people throw away things they don't value, and sometimes those things include knowledge. Old texts. Feng Tian's tone suggests he doesn't believe a word of it. Interesting. Because the formation work you demonstrated 3 nights ago shows mastery that typically requires decades of study under expert instruction. Care to explain how a half-blood with books here and there achieved such expertise? I'm a quick learner. Don't be flippant with me, boy. I'm offering you a chance to explain yourself before you what? Our protagonist interrupts, and his voice cuts through the plaza like a blade. Before you haul me away for the crime of defending my community? Before you punish me for stopping your sect from doing… What, exactly? What was that formation array for, Sect Master? Why was it targeting the half-blood district? What were you planning to do to 3,000 people who can't defend themselves? The sudden shift, in the conversation catches Feng Tian off guard. He was supposed to be the one asking questions, the one in control. But somehow this half-blood has turned it around, and now there are 3,000 witnesses listening to very uncomfortable questions. The formation was for security purposes. Security against what? Half-bloods? We're not warriors. We're not cultivators. Most of us can barely channel spiritual energy. What threat do we pose that required a ceiling formation, powerful enough to suppress an entire district? That's sect business and none of your concern. It became my concern when it targeted innocent people, when it threatened to trap and harm people who'd done nothing wrong except be born with the wrong bloodline. Our protagonist's voice rises, not in anger but in righteous indignation that resonates with everyone watching. So I'll ask again, sect master. What were you planning to do? Feng Tian realizes he's losing control of this confrontation. The crowd is listening, hanging on every word, and his responses sound defensive even to his own ears. He needs to regain the initiative. We had intelligence suggesting hostile forces were using the Half-Blood District as a base of operations. What intelligence? From what source? And if you truly believed hostile forces were present, why not investigate openly instead of building a trap? Why not evacuate innocent people first? Each question hits like a hammer, methodical and devastating. Unless, of course, the hostile forces you were worried about were the half-bloods themselves. Unless this was about control, not security. You dare accuse the Thunderfist sect of, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm asking questions, public questions in a public forum about actions that would have affected 3,000 public citizens. Isn't that reasonable? The crowd murmurs agreement. Even people who don't particularly care about half-bloods can see the logic. If a sect is going to take action that affects thousands of people, shouldn't they have to explain why? Elder Yan steps forward, trying to salvage the situation. Young man, if you truly learned these formation techniques from old texts, surely you understand that some knowledge is dangerous. The sect has a responsibility to ensure such knowledge isn't misused. Then I have a question for you, Elder. Our protagonist turns to face her directly. If knowledge is so dangerous, why does your sect hoard it? Why are cultivation techniques, formation manuals, and martial arts restricted to sect members? If you're truly concerned about people misusing knowledge, shouldn't you educate everyone so they understand it properly, rather than creating a system where only the privileged few have access? It's a rhetorical trap, and Elder Yan realizes it too late. If she says knowledge should be restricted, she admits the sects maintain power through information control. If she says knowledge should be shared, she undermines the entire sect system. She chooses not to answer at all, stepping back with a carefully neutral expression. Sect Master Feng Tian has had enough. This is pointless. You're clearly far more than you pretend to be, and these word games won't change that. You demonstrated abilities that mark you as a significant threat, and the sect has every right to detain you for what crime exactly? The question comes not from our protagonist, but from someone in the crowd. An elderly man pushes forward. It's Old Wei from the noodle stall, and he's wearing something surprising. An old military uniform, medals pinned to his chest, marking him as a decorated veteran. Who are you? Feng Tian demands. Wei Zhao, formerly Sergeant Major in the Imperial Defense Forces, retired 20 years ago after losing my leg in service. And I'm asking a simple question. What crime has this young man committed? Defending his community isn't illegal. Stopping a formation that threatened innocent people isn't illegal. Being skilled at formations isn't illegal. So what exactly are you detaining him for? More voices join in from the crowd. Yeah, what crime? Why is the sect harassing someone who protected people? This doesn't seem right. Feng Tian's spiritual pressure flares, and people near the front of the crowd stumble back from the force of it. The sect doesn't need to justify its actions to common people. Actually, you do. This new voice carries authority that makes even Feng Tian pause. The crowd parts as a figure approaches, a woman in her 60s wearing the distinctive robes of a Heaven's Gate Academy elder. Elder Wu Mei is her name, and she's one of the most respected formation experts in the entire region. Elder Wu, Feng Tian greets her carefully. The Heaven's Gate Academy maintains strict neutrality in sect politics, but they also enforce standards. Having an academy elder show up is complicating. Sect Master Feng, she replies coolly. I happened to be in the city when I heard about this situation. A formation master demonstrating unusual expertise? That interests me professionally. But more than that, I'm interested in the formation array your sect built, targeting a civilian district. May I see the documentation approving such a deployment? The formation was for security purposes, as I've explained. I'm sure it was, and surely you filed the proper permits with the City Council and the Academy's Formation Oversight Committee, as required by regional law when deploying any formation that could affect more than 100 non-cultivators? I'd like to review those documents. Feng Tian's expression tightens. There are no documents, of course. The formation was built in secret precisely because it wouldn't have been approved through official channels. The matter was time-sensitive. How convenient. And this young man who disrupted your unauthorized formation, I'd like to speak with him. Privately. It's not a request. Elder Wu Mei has the authority to make demands even of sect masters, and everyone knows it. I'm not sure that's appropriate. I'm quite sure it is. Unless you'd like me to file a formal complaint with the Academy about a sect deploying unauthorized formations in civilian areas while simultaneously harassing the person who stopped said unauthorized formations. I imagine that would trigger a full investigation. Very thorough. Very public. The threat is clear. Feng Tian can push this further, but it will cost him far more than one detained half-blood is worth. He looks at our protagonist, and for a moment, there's something like grudging respect in his eyes. This young man engineered this entire situation, ensured there would be witnesses and complications, made it politically impossible for the sect to simply disappear him. Very well, Feng Tian says stiffly, but this matter isn't closed. If we determine that you've broken any laws, used forbidden techniques, or pose a threat to public safety, we will act accordingly. I would expect nothing less from a sect dedicated to justice and public welfare, our protagonist replies, and the sarcasm is subtle enough to be deniable, but clear enough to be understood by everyone listening. Feng Tian and his cultivators depart, their spiritual pressure dissipating as they leave the plaza. The crowd remains, buzzing with conversation, processing what they just witnessed, a half-blood standing up to a major sect in public, and not only surviving, but arguably winning the confrontation. Elder Wu Mei approaches our protagonist once the Thunder Fist sect is gone. Walk with me, she says quietly. We need to talk. They move to a quieter corner of the plaza, though the crowd gives them space. Once they're relatively alone, Elder Wu studies him with keen eyes that have seen through more deceptions than he can count. That was well played, she says. You engineered a perfect trap, public confrontation, multiple witnesses, implied threats to civilians, and my fortuitous appearance to provide academic authority. I assume my arrival wasn't coincidence? The elders of the Half-Blood District have extensive networks, he admits. They may have mentioned to certain people that an interesting formation situation was developing. What those people chose to do with that information was entirely their own decision. She laughs at that. Plausible deniability. Very clever. Now let me ask you something honestly, and I expect an honest answer in return. Who are you really? Because I examined that modified formation array. The work is sophisticated beyond anything I've seen in 30 years. The underlying principles are ancient, pre-sundering at minimum, possibly earlier. No amount of old books would teach someone that level of expertise. So I'll ask again, who are you? He considers his response carefully. Elder Wu Mei is intelligent, observant, and most importantly, not affiliated with any sect. She represents the Academy which maintains standards across the entire cultivation world. She could be a valuable ally, or a dangerous enemy. I'm someone who's lived a very long time, he says carefully. Someone who's seen cycles of rise and fall, who's watched power corrupt good intentions, who's learned lessons through centuries of experience, and someone who's tired of watching the strong exploit the weak simply because they can. That's not a name. Names are just labels. They change. What matters is intention, action, consequence. My intention is to create a world where bloodline doesn't determine worth. My action is to challenge systems that perpetuate injustice. The consequence, well, we're still figuring that out. Elder Wu is quiet for a long moment. You're going to shake this region to its foundations, aren't you? I'm going to try. Whether I succeed depends on many factors, not least of which is whether people like you, people with power and position, choose to help or hinder. The Academy maintains neutrality. The Academy enforces standards. Right now, the sects violate those standards constantly, and the Academy looks the other way, because maintaining peace is easier than enforcing justice. But what if the violations become too blatant to ignore? What if public pressure demands action? Would the Academy still hide behind neutrality? She doesn't answer immediately, which is answer enough. He's struck a nerve, touched on a debate that's probably been raging within the Academy for years. When does neutrality become complicity? What you're attempting is dangerous, she finally says. You're not just challenging one sect, you're challenging the entire power structure of the region. That will make you enemies. Powerful enemies who won't hesitate to eliminate threats. I know, I've done this before. And how did it end last time? He smiles, and it's not a happy expression. Badly. I got sealed away for 1,000 years, lost everything I cared about, watched my ideals get corrupted and forgotten. But I learned from those mistakes. This time will be different. What makes you so sure? Because this time, I'm not trying to stand at the top alone. I'm building a network, a movement, something that can survive beyond any individual. The sects fear individuals. They know how to deal with single powerful threats. But movements, philosophies, ideas that spread through populations like wildfire, those are much harder to suppress. Elder Wu Mei studies him for a long moment, then nods slowly. The Academy can't officially support what you're doing. Our neutrality is too important to compromise, but... She pauses, considering her words carefully. Standards exist for a reason. When sects violate those standards, documentation of those violations should be properly filed. And if certain information happened to reach my desk about formation deployments, unauthorized activities, or violations of cultivation ethics, well, I'd be duty-bound to investigate, thoroughly. It's as close to an offer of alliance as he's likely to get from someone in her position. I understand completely, Elder Wu, and if such documentation happened to find its way to you, I'm sure you'd handle it with appropriate diligence. Indeed. She prepares to leave, then pauses. One more thing. That formation technique you used, the one that modified the Thunderfist sect's array so elegantly. I've been studying formations for 40 years, and I've never seen anything quite like it. Would you be willing to share the principles behind it? For academic purposes, of course. He considers the request. Sharing knowledge could be risky, but it could also be valuable. If Elder Wu understands his techniques, she'll realize just how ancient and sophisticated his knowledge is, which could provide him with additional credibility and protection. I could do better than that, he says. I could teach you. Not just the specific technique, but the underlying principles. The old ways, before cultivation became obsessed with bloodlines and secret techniques. When knowledge was shared, and martial arts was about perfecting oneself rather than dominating others. Her eyes light up with genuine interest. You'd do that? Knowledge grows when it's shared. It stagnates when it's hoarded. If you're truly interested in learning, I'm willing to teach. Consider it an investment in the future, one where understanding matters more than inherited power. They make arrangements for a future meeting, and then Elder Wu departs, leaving our protagonist alone in the plaza, as the crowd finally begins to disperse. He's exhausted. The spiritual energy expenditure from maintaining his composure under all that pressure, from carefully controlling his responses, from ensuring he didn't reveal too much. It's taken its toll. But it was worth it. Because today he didn't just survive a confrontation with a major sect. He demonstrated that sects can be challenged, that questions can be asked, that public opinion matters even when dealing with powerful cultivators. More importantly, he's planted seeds, doubt in the Thunder Fist sect's motivations, questions about the broader system, interest from potential allies like Elder Wu. Every person who witnessed today's confrontation will tell others, and those others will tell more, and the story will spread and grow and mutate. But the core message will remain. A half-blood stood up to a sect and survived. That simple fact changes everything. That evening, back in the half-blood district, there's an atmosphere that can only be described as electric. People who normally keep their heads down, who avoid drawing attention, who've spent their entire lives accepting their place in society, they're talking, loudly, excitedly, about what they witnessed in the plaza. Our protagonist listens to these conversations as he makes his way through the district. A group of workers discussing how that young man just asked the sect master straight out what the formation was for. A merchant explaining to customers how the sect master couldn't even give a straight answer. Children playing in the street, acting out the confrontation with exaggerated gestures and imagined dialogue. The story is already growing beyond what actually happened. Some versions have him defeating a dozen sect cultivators in combat. Others claim he's secretly a prince from a distant kingdom. Still others insist he's the reincarnation of some ancient hero. All of these are wrong, but it doesn't matter. What matters is what the story represents. Hope. Possibility. The idea that the system isn't as immutable as everyone has been taught to believe. When he reaches his building, he finds the 4 elders waiting with Old Wei, or rather, Sergeant Major Wei Jiao, as he apparently actually is. The old veteran still wears his uniform, which our protagonist now realizes isn't just for show. Those medals are real, hard-earned in battles that actually mattered. That was quite a performance, Wei Jiao says as our protagonist enters. Though I notice you dodged the sect master's actual question. You never did explain how a half-blood learned ancient formation techniques. Because there is no good explanation that doesn't reveal more than I want to reveal, our protagonist replies honestly. Better to redirect the conversation to questions about their actions rather than defending my own. Smart. Offensive is always better than defensive when you're controlling narrative. Wei Jiao leans back, regarding him thoughtfully. You've got military training. I can tell by how you position yourself, how you read a crowd, how you turn that confrontation into a tactical victory without throwing a single punch. You're very observant. I survived 30 years of service by being observant, and I'm observing that you're about to start something that's going to get a lot of people killed if it's not handled carefully. The room falls silent at that blunt assessment. Finally, Elder Wang speaks up. He's right. Today was a victory, but it was also a provocation. The Thunder Fist sect won't let this stand. They'll retaliate. Of course they will, our protagonist agrees, but they'll have to be careful about how they do it. If they come after me directly now, after that public confrontation, it'll confirm everything we implied about them. They'll have to be subtle, which means we have time to prepare. Prepare for what? Grandmother Chen asks. For the next phase. Today we challenged one sect's authority in one specific incident. Next, we need to broaden the challenge. Make it about the system, not just one bad actor. Show that the Thunder Fist sect isn't an exception. They're the rule. Every major sect in this region has similar skeletons in their closets. That's a dangerous game, Elder Li says. You're essentially declaring war on the entire power structure. No, I'm exposing what's already there. The war has been happening for decades. Sects extracting wealth and labor from half-bloods. Purebloods enjoying privileges simply due to birth. a system that perpetuates inequality and calls it natural order. I'm just making it visible. Wei Zhao nods slowly. Information warfare. Undermine their legitimacy so that when you finally do have to fight, and you will have to fight eventually, they won't have the same level of support. Smart. But you'll need better intelligence networks than what we currently have. Which is why I'm grateful you revealed yourself today, our protagonist says. A retired sergeant major with 30 years of military experience? That's exactly the kind of expertise we need, if you're willing to help. I wouldn't have worn the uniform if I wasn't willing, Wei Zhao replies gruffly. I fought for this empire because I believed in protecting its citizens. All citizens, not just the privileged ones. If you're serious about changing things, about building something better, then yes, I'll help. But I'll do it my way. Which means properly. With real intelligence gathering, actual strategic planning, and none of this making it up as we go nonsense. The next several hours are spent in detailed planning. Wei Zhao brings a military precision to the conversation that's been missing. He draws diagrams, creates timelines, identifies critical nodes in the city's power structure, and points out vulnerabilities that our protagonist, for all his ancient wisdom, simply didn't see because he lacks Wei Zhao's specific expertise. It's a reminder that no one person, no matter how powerful or knowledgeable, has all the answers. Building something that lasts requires diverse skills, different perspectives, people who can cover each other's blind spots. By the time they finish, they have the outline of a real strategy. Not a simple plan to take down one sect, but a comprehensive approach to undermining the entire system of bloodline-based privilege. It's ambitious, probably over-ambitious, but for the first time since our protagonist awakened, he feels like he's not just reacting to circumstances, he's actively shaping the future. There's one thing we haven't discussed, Elder Zhao brings up as the meeting winds down. Your actual capabilities. You've been hiding your true strength, which makes sense for survival. But at some point, you're going to need to demonstrate real power. The kind of power that makes people believe you can actually challenge the established order. I know. How much have you recovered? Wei Zhao asks bluntly. Our protagonist considers how much to reveal. These people have earned his trust, and they need to know what they're working with. Maybe 10% of what I was at my peak. Enough to handle individual cultivators up to early core formation realm, groups of weaker cultivators, complex formation work. But a full confrontation with a major sect? Right now I'd lose. How long until you're at full strength? Years. My cultivation base was severely damaged by the seal. I'm not just recovering lost power. I'm having to rebuild entire energy pathways from scratch. It's painstaking work that can't be rushed without risking permanent damage. That's a problem, Wei Zhao says flatly. You're starting a revolution while functioning at 10% capacity. That's tactical suicide. Which is why I'm not planning to win through personal power alone. The old me would have just crushed anyone who opposed me, imposed my will through superior strength. Look where that got me. Sealed away, forgotten, turned into a cautionary tale. This time, I'm building something that doesn't require me to be all-powerful. A network, a movement, an idea. Ideas are powerful, Wei Zhao concedes, but when sect cultivators show up with swords and spiritual techniques, ideas don't block attacks. You'll need protection. I have protection, all of you. The networks you've built, the intelligence you gather, the alliances we're forming, that's worth more than raw cultivation power. Pretty speech, Wei Zhao says. But I've seen too many good people die because they underestimated the other side's willingness to use violence. Promise me something. If a fight becomes unavoidable, if there's no other option, you won't hold back out of some philosophical principle. Sometimes, the only way to protect what matters is to destroy what threatens it. Our protagonist meets his eyes and nods slowly. I promise. I've made mistakes before by being too principled, too unwilling to do what was necessary. I won't make that mistake again. The meeting ends shortly after that, with everyone departing to handle their various responsibilities. Our protagonist returns to his small room. finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion of the day. He sits by the window, looking out over the Half-Blood district. The buildings are shabby, the streets dirty, the people struggling. But there's something else now. A spark. Possibility. The beginning of change. His thoughts drift to the past, to the world he knew 1,000 years ago. He wonders what his old companions would think if they could see him now. Would they approve of his methods? Or would they argue that he's repeating the same mistakes, just with different tactics? He'll never know. They're long dead, dust and memory. He's the only one left who remembers that era, who carries those lessons forward. The weight of that responsibility should be crushing. Instead, it feels like purpose. Because this time, he's going to get it right. So what happened next? Well, that's a story for another time. But let me leave you with this thought. Power isn't just about strength. It's about wisdom, strategy, and knowing when to show your hand and when to keep it hidden. Our martial god learned that lesson the hard way, sealed away for 1,000 years, because he relied too much on raw power and not enough on understanding the people around him. But he's learning now, building alliances, changing hearts and minds, creating something that can't be sealed away or forgotten. And the sects that underestimated him? They're about to discover that the most dangerous person in any conflict isn't the one with the most power. It's the one who refuses to play by the rules that keep the powerful in control. If you enjoyed this story and want to see what happens next, make sure to like and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me what you think. Should our protagonist reveal his true identity, or keep building power in the shadows? And hit that notification bell because this story is just getting started. Until next time, remember, never judge someone by their bloodline. Judge them by their actions. Because the person everyone calls trash might just be the god who's going to change the world.